And are you in, Kylie? Yeah. We're live. Hi, it's Bob. But you knew that. I'm here with Victor Machado from Post&Wall. Victor, thanks for joining me, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Bob.
So I've been trying to get Victor on the show for a long time because he is an absolute guru in digital marketing and branding, and he's one of my go-to guys that I bring into engagements that I'm working on where we need real deep expertise on generating leads and generating sales, and everybody has that problem from solution providers to VR operators. And so I just wanted to give an opportunity for him to spread a little bit of his knowledge around the VR industry and get some good thinking, creative thinking going about virtual reality. Speaking of gurus, Andre Lawless is in the audience as well, who's my other marketing gun. And so, if you've got questions about marketing, you got some of the brightest guys on the planet right here on this webinar. So ask away. Anything you've got, throw it in the chat. I'll be watching the chat. I'll ask everybody. Andre, are you camera-able too? If we want to bring you on for something.
Oh, nice.
We could do a three-way. Wow. I could get some funk. Not pretty today. You're always pretty.
Come on.
Anyway,
man.
I'm coming to you live from New Orleans, Louisiana, in the French Quarter. And Victor, I assume you're somewhere in Massachusetts, right?
I am absolutely somewhere just north of Boston in Massachusetts. So yeah, absolutely.
All right, so we have to ask the pressing question. What the fuck happened with Antonio Brown?
Dude, that was a disaster. I mean, even as a fan, I love the New England Patriots, but when they did that, I was like, it's a ticking time bomb. Like, what are you doing? So, I don't know. I'm glad that they pulled the plug quickly.
Yeah, so Andre's saying they can't see or hear you, which is weird. Usually I'm the one that has that problem.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing you guys. I'm seeing
okay, Tanya says there. Andre, go ahead and refresh your browser, see if that helps.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Tanya.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
So sorry about that. About that.
Well, you know me and tech issues.
Yeah. So all right. So where do we want to start? Let's start with talk a little bit about your background. Like, who are you? What do you do? How'd you get here? What have you worked on that's relevant to the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually do have a creative background, although professionally my background really was technology and sales. And my last position before starting this agency was in leading a sales team where we took a cloud security business from being a regional New Jersey thing to a US thing and over into Europe. Got a lot of exposure to a lot of agencies and found a lot of what I thought were obvious misses. So we started Post&Wall as a digital agency back in 2014. We're completely self-funded, so we wanted to go after franchises because we thought that would be a good way to get started. So folks that are in the segment for FECs, Sky Zone. We've been working with Sky Zones since 2014. Restaurants in the fast, healthy, casual space, Protein House out of Vegas, and working with the New England team. We've launched and been part of launching a couple of restaurants in that segment as well, which has been great work for us. And then in 2017, we were actually approached by two prior customers who started MindTrack VR, and they brought us on to help them launch and promote their product in New England. So that's really how we got started in VR back in 2017. Today, we're working with VR manufacturers, Box Blaster, and helping them get established from a brand and marketing lead gen perspective here in the US. We're also working with Virtuex and really providing marketing lead gen services for them with a specific focus on their Omni Arena. So, it's been 2 years in the space. We've seen a lot of changes, a lot of really cool innovation, and we're also starting to see just a lot of new names. So it's a great time to be working this vertical.
Yeah, and it's hard because it's getting really crowded. Like I just came from Paris and did was at IAPA Paris, and there were over 60 virtual reality attractions there, which is a much smaller show than the Orlando show. So I think we're going to see probably 100 or more at Orlando in November. And so it's getting really hard to separate yourself from all the noise and the pack out there, whether you're selling a VR solution or you're operating a virtual reality arcade or an entertainment center with virtual reality. And so how do you see that, and what are some of the challenges there, and what do people do about it?
So, I mean, the first thing that we really do is we really listen to the customer. This whole, if you're talking about marketing from a lead gen perspective, whether you're an FEC today and you're basically trying to sell tickets, or whether you're a manufacturer and you want an FEC or amusement center to take you on, it's really important that we really listen to how the customer sees themselves, compare that to what they've been broadcasting in their digital existence, and there are always gaps, and then it's kind of like coming back and holding the mirror up to it and having that conversation around, here's what you think of yourself, here's what you say about yourself, and here are the obvious misses that we want clarification on. Because if we're going to be helping to build messaging on different platforms, right, we want to be able to make sure that we're using the correct language, the differentiated language messaging, right? So that's the big thing. From a B2B perspective, marketing lead gen is really all about, driving brand awareness, and through that, getting to customer intent. And there are different channels to accomplish that in. I'd say this: lead gen marketing is a process. It's not a silver bullet. It's not if we do X and Y, we are absolutely guaranteed to get Z. It's a process. And I think that the best time to be doing any of this is when you've got the most runway to operate in and to try things. But we don't have that as a perfect condition. So we really try to expedite to get to those things.
Yeah, the thing I see really frequently is, that if I build it, they will come mentality. I'm going to build a product, everybody's going to love it, they're going to buy it, or I'm going to open a center and everybody's going to be amazed by it, and they're going to line up around the block. And then when that doesn't happen, panic sets in, and by then resources have been squandered and urgency sets in, and we need results tomorrow. And look, unfortunately, that's the reality we all have to work in sometimes, because I think there's a lot of naivete around, and I think that's especially happening in the VR market. I don't know, maybe you see it in other verticals, but I think in the VR market, because VR is so amazing and that tech demo is so great, and what happens is entrepreneurs get a lot of what I call false positive reactions, right? So they show their thing to everybody, and everybody that doesn't do VR and doesn't know the market looks at it and goes, wow, this is amazing. And they're encouraged by that. Yeah. And then they show it to me and I'm like, it looks like 17 other things that I've seen. How are you different? And they're like, what the fuck do you mean? It's amazing. And I'm like, it's not amazing. It's just typical. And I get that so much. And it breaks my heart to tell an entrepreneur that their stuff isn't amazing. And then the question becomes, how do you make it amazing? Or how do you find a place, a market niche where it's amazing? And so do you see that in other markets, or is that kind of unique to the VR market, do you think?
I mean, look, honestly, we see that in other markets. It's amazing how many things are missed or rushed or forgotten at the very start, right? Really simple things like, to a marketer, a brand guide isn't just about colors and fonts. It really is about backing what your statement is about yourself, about how you see yourself, about what is your culture, right? And if someone who is really low on the totem pole is working for you and they're at a party this weekend and they're so super psyched to be working at your organization, and somebody says, hey, Fred, so what is it that you do? That they should absolutely positively lead with, right, the most amazing statement about what the organization believes in about itself. Because if you just say, I work for a VR company and, we're a certain size footprint and we have these game tiles and all this other stuff, so what? But
Yeah.
The listing piece. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bob. You want to say something?
No, go ahead. Go. No. Finish.
I was just going to say, look, the listing piece, and I'll call out Box Blaster for this because honestly, I love working with that team. The really early on, probably our second call, Vladimir said something that I felt was just like the rallying cry. And his thing was, look, this is what we're doing. This is what the business model is. And the reason why we're doing this is because we believe that you don't have to be in a major metropolitan city, a Chicago, an LA, or wherever, that you should be able to walk into any of your local entertainment centers, family entertainment centers, and be able to experience VR and be able to experience it in all of its richness, right? And I just thought, man, that's the thing. That is the foundation. That's what we're going to build off of.
Yeah, and that's the Simon Sinek wrote that book Start With Why, because people resonate with that why. And if you're making a capital investment and you're buying something and you're building a long-term relationship, I think those things are actually move people, and that's what people resonate with, and that can be the differentiation between buying one product or another. Certainly in the B2B space, I think that's spot on. Yeah,
sure. The mechanics of starting to dial in customer intent actually, believe it or not, starts with your website. And again, I don't care if you're an FEC operator today or if you're a manufacturer, whatever the heck you're doing, frankly, it's what is the path that you're giving folks to come in on, right? Because when you're doing specific campaigns, I'm not talking about hitting the homepage and that's where the majority of the traffic is going to funnel into. Is if we're starting to do marketing campaigns where what we're trying to do is to get to customer intent and isolate intent and build audiences that we can remarket to and do all of those things that are mechanical by nature in marketing, right? We need to make sure that we're giving a very clear and concise entryway to your website and giving folks a way to react to content that tells us, look, this isn't just curiosity. This is someone who is in a certain phase doing their homework. They might be closer. Even looking at disengagement times tells us that this is someone who has done their homework. They've seen something here already that they've seen before, and it has resonated or it hasn't resonated because they've taken this action, right?
All right. So for people who aren't familiar with marketing lingo and jargon, right? Let's unpack this a little bit. So you're talking about intent. What is intent? Like, I know what intent means. Like, I intend to work out today and I'm not going to do it. What does intent mean from that perspective within the marketing language?
So very simply, it's we always want to get to as close as we can to knowing when a buyer is ready to buy, right? Because making a sale 2 years from now isn't going to help you this quarter. It's not going to help you this month. So really isolating intent, it's very much a sales thing, and it's not sexy, but it's how we all live. So it's about putting certain indicators in the pathway that allow us to understand whether they are new and just collecting information or if they're further along in their journey.
And I can't tell you how important this is. I coach executives, often first-time CEOs, entrepreneurs that are doing this for the first time. Sometimes I'll coach a sales team, and I always see that there's this thing, the famous line from Glenn Ross, right? Where what's his name? Where he has the coffees for closers scene.
Alec Baldwin.
Who's the actor? Alec Baldwin is standing up there and he's he's berating the sales staff. And he writes up on the chalkboard, A, B, C, always be closing. Right. And today, maybe that worked in the 80s. Yeah. Today, nothing is further from the truth, because if you've got somebody who's just starting out that consideration journey and you try to close them too soon, you totally lose them. They're gone forever. And so so what tools do you have in the tool chest to be able to signal and measure intent so people know how to treat a lead, whatever that might be?
Sure. So, bringing them in through a specific landing page, or depending on, what the program is, a specific custom page. It might not even be publicly visible, right? It's a page that exists on the site, but it's a hidden landing page. Putting specific resources in that path. The difference between why, a white paper on why VR is important to your FEC is going to be different than here are 6 keys to financing your product, your project, right? Those are 2 very different things that someone would be considering and looking at as they're doing their homework. And
are you suggesting that engaging with financing, they're further in the consideration process because they're interested in that versus like thinking about what do I buy? Or is that a signal of where they are in that funnel?
Listen, if you're looking at financing options, you are already on the road. That indicates that you are now part of a serious consideration. At a minimum, it indicates that they want to understand what your perspective is and how you line up. And the number one thing that buyers want to do before they get their first phone call is they want to figure out what your price is, what the gotchas are, and whether or not they're in the ballpark for what it is that you sell and provide. And frankly, you want to talk about that too, right?
So let's talk about pricing, because this is a big one, right? And where and when in that consideration funnel do you start talking about pricing? Because I have my own theories on that, and I think it's different based on the positioning of the company. But do you put pricing on the website? Do you announce pricing? We just had a debate with one of my clients about a change in pricing and how aggressive do they announce the change in pricing, and so there was a lot of active debate around that. And so what's your take on how do you handle that?
I'll give you my personal take on that, okay? And then I'll tell you that we serve our clients, and so we don't always win. I will tell you that we're running campaigns right now for a manufacturer, and the lowest engagement and click rate are around ads that have information around size and pricing, right? The lowest engagement are absolutely around those 2 elements. I think pricing is a person-to-person conversation. It's a dynamic conversation because, frankly, you could be positioning yourself or putting yourself in a position that you don't want to be in and automatically disqualifying yourself just because someone didn't pick up on whether it's a directly communicated or a nuance of communication. So when it comes down to pricing, this goes back to sales, never mind marketing, it's a person-to-person conversation. First and foremost.
What if your positioning is as a price leader?
You know what? I came from technology. I was on the infrastructure and security side of things. I've seen the race to the bottom. I'll say this because of the audience that you have. Don't be stupid. Don't race to the bottom on price, because you are the new shiny toy. Although some of you have been living this for a decade, you are the new shiny toy, and don't devalue yourself. I'm not saying collude and price fix, but I'm absolutely saying don't race to the bottom. Differentiate your model, your business model, differentiate your offering, but for God's sake, don't just start giving it away because it's easy. Because I'll tell you, and this goes back to, God, Barry's last name escapes me now, my very first sales manager when I was wet behind the ears still, basically said to me, you know what? I've never seen anybody put the toothpaste back in the tube. And that's absolutely correct, right? All of this end of quarter incentive garbage, all of that. Look, you start to play with the numbers, you start to play with predictability, you start to play with your overall model for the year. And next thing you know, you look up and you say, what the hell happened? I thought we were going to be at X and we're not even close.
This is a gross generalization, but I think typically discounting makes up for bad salesmanship. That's kind of my position. Now, that's a gross generalization, and there are always exceptions to every single rule. But if you rely on pricing as your strategy, discount pricing, then you've misset your market. Your product market fit isn't right. Your market segmentation isn't done. Your sales, you probably got everything wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't disagree with that. You can't. You can't. People don't. Well, let me be careful about how I say this, because then I don't want to sound naive. I mean, look, there are people that buy on price, right? It is what it is. There are people that buy.
My friend Michael Getman, who might be listening, is an absolute, and I've introduced you to him.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
In fact, I think my introduction to you, I said, be careful, he's a cheapskate, right? And he's always looking for the best price. And I love using him as an example, because he loves me so much, he'll forgive me no matter what I say. And but I'll give you as an example of this, and I how much of this is marketing, how much of this is sales, but it's really about emotion. And I think that gets to a driver for activating a lead into a buyer. And he was at IAPA last year, and I'm trying to get him to look at all these different systems. And he's like, Bob, what should I buy? And I say, look at this. He says, it's too much money. Look at this. It's too much money. Look at this. It's too much money. And these were all systems that were in the $15,000 to $25,000 per player position price. And he goes to IAPA and he sees the vArsenal thing for 35 grand, and he orders one off the show floor. Like, it's an unproven product. It's a raw prototype. It was broken down half the time. It was way more per player position than anything else on the market. And he bought it. And I said, what happened, Mike? And he said, I fell in love. He just, it was a purely emotional purchase for him. Now, turned out it's working out okay for him. And so that's great. And I'm glad it did. But it just goes to show you can have all that pricing stuff. Like, those are prices are reason not to buy, I think, generally, not a reason to buy. I don't know if that's true or not. I just made that up, actually. How did that sound?
No, I don't completely disagree with it, with the caveat again, where there's always going to be someone who just buys on price no matter what. However, look, people want to be tweaked. They want to be turned on, right? They absolutely want to be engaged, because the way they start to feel about something is how they start to feel or think that that's how their customer is going to perceive this as well. I'll tell you, you've got someone when they start selling with your talking points. When they start talking, they haven't purchased the product yet, but when they get on and they start echoing back, right, the things that you have in your literature, on your website, from past conversations that they don't recall, but that's where that little piece of speak came from. That's when you know that it's like mission accomplished. Now we just have to get to where we need to make this transaction happen, right? Yeah. But people respond, I think with their hearts. And then they get to the process of the dollars. But I think it really starts with how do you engage them, and what is it about what you're doing that is that special and unique that makes everyone excited, right? Because that's how they feel that their customers are going to be excited about the solution if they bring it into their particular arcade or FEC.
All right, so let's get back to because you started talking about the website. I took us down a rat hole. I want to pull back up and talk about, because a lot of what people do is they're talking about the technology. And you said that the lowest levels of engagement, where you talk about size and you talk about price, you're talking about like a little bit around the weeds, right, of the consideration. What's the highest level of engagement? And is that what you lead with on your website? Like, and you're creative in your social? Like, what do you see that works well?
So if we're talking about a B2C play for the folks in your audience who operate amusement centers and FECs, and frankly, I think this is just a general rule in marketing. The eyes are the window to the soul, and the eyes sell more than any copy can. And I think if you're using content like video and you're showing experience, this is what you want to show and feature and showcase to start to pull anyone in. That's if you're an FEC or an amusement operator. If you're a manufacturer, what you want to focus on is, and it depends on the arc of your history, right? But if you already have sales and if you have a track record, you want to feature the people who you've sold to, who are being successful with your product. You want to be using those sliders at the top with their headshot, their logo, and their big punch out quote. Because guess what? It's not about you. It's never about you. If you ever know, I'm sorry, Bob. No, I know. Well, I love you though, but it's not about you completely, right? It's really about, no one tells you how awesome you are more than your customers, right? And I mean, this is the thing that feeds the machine. So if you're in the B2B space, you want to really, pull in with that. If you're new and you're starting out and you don't have a track record yet, right? You want to do whatever you can to seed the market, to get some learnings, get some results, get some of that information. And as part of that landing page anyway, even if you've been there for a while, is you obviously want to have what your differentiated statements are, what your statement is to the world. Why are you here? Why did you bother to even do this in the first place? Why is it special? And why is it that there's nothing else they're going to want to consider but this? It all has to be part of that landing page. The informational stuff, that's when we start to get into customer intent and drilling into that. But that first statement, and it's not necessarily always on the homepage. I mean, it really isn't always completely there. It's it's really to engage the mind, right? Engage the heart.
So where do you put it? You're saying put it in your creative, in social media, and
So absolutely. So the places to put it would be, we're seeing more. So if you're an FEC or an amusement center, you absolutely should be on Facebook. You should be on Instagram. You should be using video content whenever you possibly can. We're starting to see a bit more relevance even on the B2B side, because just of the pure numbers of folks who have Facebook loaded up on their device, that if somehow you start to remarket to them and they see you in the feed, it's like, oh, I'm seeing it in email, I'm seeing it here, I'm seeing it when I search, those kinds of things.
So let's hold on. I want to stop you there, because I want to talk about remarketing, and I want to talk about repetition, because I was just talking to somebody this morning, and we were talking about advertising. And back in the old day, in television and radio, when it was a thing, you'd see the same ad all the time, and it was kind of frustrating as a viewer, right, to watch. Before we could fast forward with DVR and TiVo, you would have to sit through commercials. I don't know if anybody else on this thing is old enough to remember those days, but I remember those days. And you'd hear the same freaking ad over and over and over again. And now today's version of that is retargeting. And so what is retargeting? How do you use it? And why is it critical? Because I talk to so many people that don't even know what it is.
So retargeting is absolutely critical, because, if I say Progressive, Allstate Insurance, I'm sure everybody wants to pull their hair out until they're bald, because you see that on just about every platform you are on, including traditional TV. So
Mayhem's fucking hilarious creative.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll watch it all day long.
Yeah. Entertaining is important as well, depending on what it is that you're doing, right? The reason why remarketing is important is because they've touched you once, and now that you have them, and if you have the volume of records, right, on the platform, because it varies from platform to platform, you just want to be a constant site of awareness. So maybe the first time they went to your website, they went through a couple of things. It doesn't really matter how long they stayed, frankly. We've captured the record. Now, the next time they go do something else.
Now, when you say capture the record, what does that mean?
So we use tracking codes, right? Every marketer uses tracking codes. The reason why Facebook and Google are being pulled in front of, the EU governance and here in the US and all this other stuff is that, cookies and other kinds of tracking code are used where we're now isolating. Frankly, we could isolate down, if they would disclose the information, isolate down to the actual person based on the 3, 4, 7 devices that they have and guess correctly who it is, but they don't disclose to that level, right? Our customers would love it if they do, but not when it comes to their own privacy, of course. So it's about
you go to the website and you drop a cookie or a pixel or something It's in the code. When you go to the website, they've
Yep.
accepted the little thing that everybody has to do because of, GRPD, GPRS, whatever the fuck that thing is.
Right.
And now what happens? So
Well,
you need to track them.
Yeah, so now let's say we're on Google as a platform, right? They don't say that it was Bob Cooney that came to your site. They just say, look, you're building a remarketing list. You've got your own database, and oh, by the way, now you're over 3,000 records, 10,000 records. Now on the next campaign, when it says, how do you want to target? You want to target by industry, by this, by that. We say, no, actually, I want to retarget by this particular remarketing group, because I now have 100% certainty that you've touched us at least once. So now that particular secondary campaign is going to be a much more directed display ad banner. It's going to be a much more directed message. One of the things around lead gen marketing, especially if you as an organization haven't been doing any, is that you have to start building a volume of records. And before you can even really get to the selling part, you have to get to the brand awareness part and pushing out messages about who you are, why you're different, why you're special. And I don't care if it's on LinkedIn or wherever it is, and you want to get people to come on and take a look at that. I think two of the most powerful digital platforms that folks just, for whatever reason, aren't keen into are YouTube TV and Hulu, right? And soon Disney, because that is today's TV, right?
And Disney, and by the way, Hulu is going to be bundled in with Disney Plus for $12 a month starting in November. And so everybody is going to subscribe to it and be watching it. Yep.
With the ESPN Plus as part of that bundle. Absolutely.
With the ESPN Plus,
yeah. So so that's the remarketing in any way is that. And frankly, even if we were just running campaigns off of a platform like LinkedIn or just like a Facebook, if you are not using tracking code and if you're not building custom audiences, you're really missing out. It's really important that you do. The flip side of that is you might have a huge database of emails, right? And you say, well, I want to remarket to these folks, which we say, fantastic, let's load them up into the platforms and let's let the platforms tell us how many of these folks actually use this particular email address to log in and use them as a record. So there's a couple of different ways to get to remarketing, but I'll tell you that if you show up with a hefty list of a hefty size, and then you come out with a 7% return on that, which is still, enough, folks kind of get shocked by that. And it's like, well, you have to that valid address. It has to be an address that's used on the platform. Maybe the people, chances are good that they are on the platform, but not with this particular ID. And there's all kinds of things that kind of work through.
Yeah. Okay. So, but retargeting in essence is somebody comes to your website or they interact with an ad somewhere, and it's a function of tracking them across multiple platforms and making sure that they see you everywhere they go online. So they have that repetition. So when they all of a sudden trigger over to intent, as you call it, right? That because it used to be called, in direct mail, it used to be called last one in. Right. So I'm really showing my age now. Direct mail. By the way, if you're not using direct mail has become a value compared to digital platforms, by the way, now. So I'll just throw a little tip at you. It's really super cheap to send postcards, and nobody does it anymore. People get postcards like, wow, what's this? That's old school. Let me stick it on the refrigerator. But it used to be called last one in, which is when somebody was ready to make a purchase, the person who sent the postcard right before the purchase was the person that got the sale often. And I think the digital version of that is what you're talking about, is retargeting, is being in front of them until they're ready to make their purchase decision. And it's critical.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. You see, so customer insight, one of the things that we have found in creating the path is also kind of figuring out, like, what are the little mousetraps for those things? What are the goals to set? How do we value those goals? And then how specific we want to be in the remessaging of that. But again, a lot of this stuff takes time. So if you've got schedule a demo link, right? They hit the submit button. If they don't get anything else after the submit button, you've lost an opportunity, and we've lost a way to track that they got a thank you page served up, which now tells us not only should you have an inbound request, we now absolutely positively want to remarket to everyone who got a thank you page served so that we follow them around until it's an absolute yes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And talk about time to response, because that's another thing I think companies do horribly wrong, which is, I think there's some statistics, and I don't know if I'm sure they're still relevant, that says that if you contact that person within like 7 seconds of them hitting the send button, the odds of selling them is 70% higher or something ridiculous. I don't know what the stats are. I can look them up. But what's your experience been with that? And what can companies do to, whether it's B2C or B2B, I don't think it matters. Like if somebody's interested,
right,
like the phone should ring, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I would say, so the one thing that we think is a really big value service, we actually don't do this, but on websites, you have all of these auto-answer chat bots, right, that actually will engage someone live, that then gets them into the process. So I think that that's a very high-value piece of technology, right? When we're doing, excuse me, any of the, depending on the goal of the particular campaign, but on something like search, for instance, right? Even on a simple text-based search ad, if you're not including an extension that is a phone number to a sales pool, you're missing out, because the chances are incredibly high, number one, that they're looking at your entire existence on a mobile device. And number two, if you're a person of a certain age, I don't want to fill out a form. I want to talk to somebody. Make that happen. So you need to have that, for as much as things have changed, for as many new technology, enablers we have, at the end of the day, when someone is serious, they want to talk to another person, Yeah. And so looking at that whole side of the operation becomes important too.
And so Eric Schwartzman, by the way, another, he wrote the very first book on B2B social marketing, by the way. So Eric and I go back. He was my VP of marketing at LaserStorm going back into the 90s. And so Eric and I go back a long way. And he actually wrote a book published by Wiley Press called B2B Marketing for the Social Business or something like that. Eric can put a link to it in the chat if you're interested. I'm not sure how relevant the content is today because these platforms, change, but I'm sure the strategies are fairly similar. He's saying that a white paper or webinar download is not necessarily a sign that people are ready to be engaged. And that's really around building awareness. And that takes me to thought leadership, because a lot of the clients that I'm working with, or some of them, and I know some of the stuff you're doing is around thought leadership, blogging, educating and informing. And LinkedIn just published a white paper, which I found fascinating, talking about the gap between B2B buyers valuing thought leadership marketing and B2B companies doing marketing undervaluing the B2B marketing. And so it's like massive. It's like 88% of the buyers said it drives my purchase decisions, and 22% of the sellers are saying we think it's actually driving people's purchasing decisions. And so, like, what do you make of that gap, and how do you do thought leadership, like marketing for if you're selling a solution into VR? And is there a way to is there any value in that in B2C for operators? It's like I haven't thought about that, but it's an interesting thing to explore.
So B2B marketing has been problematic now for a really long time. If you talk to certain folks, they'll tell you that B2B marketing has been dead on the vine for a really long time. And the reason why is because it's all about the me. Instead of being about the you, about the solution, about the story. And there's some large organizations that are waking up to that and doing a good job. So I don't want to be broad in the statement, but for the most part, there are a lot of organizations that just have not tuned into the fact that they have to somehow represent themselves through a story and through having people have a way to connect in. Like today, there are so many buyers in different segments that they care about things like whether or not your company is part of the community, and if it is, what exactly does that mean? I mean, and think about this. If you're a VR manufacturer, you can't be part of everybody's community. And what will it be? right? So maybe you have a tie-in to STEM. Maybe you're doing something that supports it in one way or another. Maybe your engineers do a college day or do something that shows some kind of outreach to community. You know, on the B2B side of things, frankly, it's a lot of it is dry toast. Right? There's not a, you know, folks just want to show themselves, but they're missing out on the human engagement piece. And if there's a place to do some work in, I'd say that that's the area to do it. If you're going to be, and if you are a very traditional company, if you haven't looked at what LinkedIn is providing for tools for communicating, then you really have to get on the platform and pay attention. You know, the first thing that we tell our manufacturers that we're working with and that we've told them is that, look, great that you have a business page, but people care way more about what you're saying as the CEO of the company than anything your business page is saying. Now, both of you should be marrying each other with certain messaging, right? If we're doing some kind of a promotion platform, you know, push, whatever it is, but, you know, really maximize the channel. The other thing is that, you know, there's posts, there's blogs, and now there's articles. You can actually have something that's in between a post and a blog. And on top of that, use creative. That's eye-catching. That says something about what your message is or what your organization is about. There are a lot of tools that are available that just are being missed. And so we talk through that with our clients. You know, look, at the end of the day, for us, we do the mechanics of marketing, right? Where we're getting into the retargeting strategies and the mechanics and the weeds of all this stuff that frankly is not sexy. It just isn't. But where we get jazzed up is when the content says something, right? When the stuff that we're working with actually really moves a buyer to think about you in terms that go beyond VR manufacturer, for player,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I want to go back to the thought leadership for B2C, because something dawned on me. A big part of what I think operators need is to build multiple revenue pillars, and one of those is corporate training, right? Or groups, birthday parties, you know, sales retreats, like whatever it is. Yeah. Is there, and those are business buyers that are buying, not birthday parties necessarily, but all the corporate business stuff. I don't see anybody doing any, I haven't seen it, I'm not saying it's any kind of thought leadership on the arcade operator side that's driving towards people in their market that might be looking to buy, you know, groups to entertain their executives or their sales teams or reward certain players. Is there an opportunity there, and how would they go about it?
Yeah, there's a great opportunity there, and I look at it kind of like, you know, when we look at FECs and amusement centers, we see like the traditional, you know, a couple of segments of revenue, right? There's the ticket for whether it's a jump ticket or it's an arcade pass or whatever it is, right? So that's a big part of the revenue. And then the other part that really matters are things for like birthday bookings. When you get over to group events, you start to very quickly get into pictures of middle-aged fat white guys around, you know, a tray of buffalo wings and pictures of beer.
Hey, wait a second.
That was not a reflect. No. That'll make me stand up and prove the point. No. But really, it's look, the way to attack group sales, whether it's corporate or it's personal, right? Bachelor parties, bachelorette parties, whatever it is the female buyer. Look, women, and we've seen it time and again, whether it's, you know, the FECs we've worked with, or even, you know, the work we did with MindTrack, it's off the charts. You have like the upfront engagement, especially for something like VR, is a male demo. When you actually got down to like who the buyers were, who the planners and the buyers are, it's the women. They plan things. Despite you, they'll plan it for you and your friends because you're useless, right? So So when you're gearing that, you have to really be very, very aware of the female purchase power and really cater to that, right? Have some of your content that caters and speaks to that.
And so Eric posted a question earlier about buyer personas, and that's I haven't talked to many either solution providers or operators that do that work. The bigger guys like Dave and Buster's, the Main Event, they have that down with science.
Yeah.
But most independent small businesses have no idea what they even are, unfortunately. And so you hit on a really interesting point about women and the buying power of women in this, and yet you see all of these arcades focusing on technology. Right. And games, and so how would you advise them? I tell them to try to be more evocative and talk about the experience and how people are going to feel if they come and visit and play the game. But how would you advise an arcade owner or an FEC that doesn't, that just wants to do that one thing, is let me broaden my audience and start speaking to the moms and the wives and the girlfriends? How do they do that?
Well, it starts off by representing them in the creative, right? And it starts off by representing them in ways that matter to them, in ways that either show leadership or in ways that show the authenticity of an experience. Because at the end of the day, what mother does not derive joy from watching their child discover something new? And so what's the piece of creative? The piece of creative, if it's video, might be capturing the mom who's still in focus but not primary part of the shot, seeing their child at whatever age they happen to be experiencing something and having a wow moment, right? And tuning into that. If you're talking about corporate events, you want to basically show women in the leadership position role in front of the room, leading men through, whether it's a presentation or a workshop kind of theme, image, or whatever it is. And then you want to have copy that supports that and that speaks to it. So it's, look, the biggest, because we've tried to crack the microbrew vertical, just because I love microbrews and I think it's a great vertical to be in. But I remember here in New England we've got a brewery called Lord Hobo, and they're national. And the first time I went in and met with them, and we were doing kind of a discovery conversation, for everybody to kind of figure out everybody. And I just said, what is your strategy for your female demographic? Like, how do we get past the beards and the plaid shirts and the man buns? And not a single person had an answer, right? And there was one sheepish smile by the one female executive who was in the room. And I just, this goes back even to, I don't know, about a year and a half ago or so, where I just say, you're missing it. You're missing one of the most important demographics, not just because of buying power, but because of pure organization and execution.
Yeah. Yeah, and so Eric just posted, he talks about he gets much higher engagement with, when he shows women doing, playing Richie's Plank, which is a great game, great, spectator experience. Good lighting, good lines of sight from moms to see kids. Like, that's more operational stuff. But if you can show that in, like, no mom wants to take their kid and stick them in a dark booth in a narrow corridor. And like some of those, I was talking to a guy this morning from Redline VR in Chicago, and I love what they're doing. They're building this great VR social space with a full bar. And he was talking about how, like, a lot of the VR arcades look like porn theaters. And I just shivered at the thought of that, but he's right. And then when you show it and it's all dark and it's black light and like creepy, it doesn't look like a place that you want to come and hang out. But that's not. But if you've got a place like that, get in close, change the lighting. I think this is what he's talking about, is at least make it look brighter and you're creative. You've built what you've built, right? You got to make it appealing somehow.
Yeah, and you also have to have a balance in that. So to the point of bringing it into your creative and, frankly, messaging on what you're selling. If what you have for a vibe is always dark, right? So zombies and shooting zombies is a leading theme in VR. Got it. But you know what? Show the colorful landscapes. Post-apocalyptic, we get it. Everyone's done it. They've seen it. They've become numb to it. Even when you're playing, whether you're video, capturing people playing the attraction, you have to have that balance of light and color. And frankly, even when you get down to things like your brand and how you're representing your branding, right? It's I think the VR space would probably benefit from less grays and varying shades of black and coming in with light. Yeah, I mean, look, you see products that jump out at you because of the light, right? I mean, the people playing VR don't know that it's well lit. They could care less. They're in the middle of adventure, but everything that is around them is really well lit. It becomes a spectator, sport and something to get the next person to want to line up and to purchase into. So.
Yeah, so somebody just posted. So we were talking about thought leadership around team building and stuff like that. And this is a blog post on a website from an arcade owner who's here chatting with us, Timothy Glass, and just shared that. I thought I'd share that with everybody just to show some people are doing it.
That's great.
And I'm curious, Timothy, like where did you post that? And if you can maybe talk a little bit in the chat, like what kind of response did you get? How did that work? Because my ideas in a vacuum mean nothing. It's like people applying them and getting responses back and how they're working are important. So the other thing so I've had a lot of debates on some of the Facebook groups around the term VR arcade and feel like it really sells short what's possible in virtual reality and some of these experiences. And I got so much blowback from those posts of people saying, well, people aren't searching for VR experience center, they're searching for arcade. And I was trying to explain to them that the audience is broader than the potential audience is broader than the people that are searching in Google, typing in VR arcade. And so when you're out there and you're looking at like keywords and what are you buying, and maybe going back to Mindtrack and trampoline parks and some of that stuff, like what are some of the strategies these guys can use to broaden the audience a little bit beyond just the gamer who's looking to come in and shoot zombies for an hour?
So if you're an FEC amusement center, the good news is that you're in a much better position and place from a pushing out ads, having keywords that will bring folks to you so that they see that there's an experience to be had and all of those kinds of things. If you're on the B2B side, it is really difficult because when you really tune in, as we have, keywords, what you're going to find is that you're going to be found less. Now, the first thing a client does is they panic. First thing I do is I say, thank God we've eliminated a bunch of noise, because now you're getting clicks for people who aren't looking at HTC goggles, right? Or looking for the next home system or any of those things. I mean, why aren't we seeing millions of people click to our website? Well, because you do something that's very, very specific, right? And that process of even fine tuning, especially on the B2B side, takes a little bit longer and a little bit more of a science to it. But that's Google. One of the things, and I'm trying not to, because I see Tim's thing there on LinkedIn, but I'm like shiny lights and I get all distracted. One of the things I wanted to just cover is one of the first parts of the conversation that we have with any prospect is really having them understand that there's different value and costs to being on different platforms. LinkedIn gets you closer to a customer intent. However, LinkedIn is also traditionally known to be a platform where that's where you're kind of going if you're job hunting. So just because someone is there that you can identify by industry, by title, which is great, by geography, which LinkedIn, and that's why you pay a premium, frankly, for those clicks over other platforms. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be there when your ad is cycling, right? So one of the things that we really try to talk through with any of our prospects and customers is just what's the value of each platform, and how applicable is it going to be to what we're doing here and what we're trying to accomplish.
And look, I think one of the challenges is these platforms have all made it very easy to self-serve ad campaigns for entrepreneurs and business owners. And they make it look easier than it really is. They make it easy to take your money,
Right.
but delivering results is a different thing. And I know I've played around myself. Like I'm a marketing guy. I've been marketing for 35 years, and I go on and I spend money just to every once in a while. I'll drop some money in a bucket to do something and test.
Yeah.
I don't get shit for results. And I'm probably smarter about this shit than most people are. And it's just throwing money away. And so this is the thing where I really struggle, because most agencies don't take this personally, because I don't include you in this because you're you're a really small team. But most agencies will, they fly in the big guy, the Don Draper, and he wows everybody, and then they leave. And because you're a small business owner, you have a tiny budget, they leave you with some intern that doesn't know his ass or her ass from a hole in the ground, right? And all they do is take your money every month. And after 3 or 4 or 5 months, you're like, what the fuck's going on? And you fire them and you hire another agency and you rinse and repeat. And that has been my experience in the agency business.
Right.
And Andre knows what I'm talking about. And so so how can a small business, and this is and this isn't meant to tee this up as an ad pitch for you, but how can a small business, that you can't do it yourself effectively? I think that there's too many platforms. They change too frequently. Yeah. The best practices are changing all the time. I don't know how you do it yourself. Like, how do they fucking get their hands around this and do it effectively? Because it's critical. Like, what do they do besides call you?
Yeah, so they do eventually get around to calling us, and what I'm really happy about is that we're having bigger businesses call us, because each of these platforms are changing like monthly, right? This past year, Facebook has undergone significant changes. On a different channel, on a marketing podcast called Confessions of a Marketer, I actually did 3 segments just because of Google's change in their algorithm from last year. And why all of a sudden things like Google My Business actually matters, right? Where it has been irrelevant for so long. We spend as an agency about 20% of our time each month just in learning, right? Some of that is keeping up, and a lot of it is learning, and then keeping an eye forward always on what's out there. So if you're a small organization, how do you do it? Well, if you're an FEC or an amusement center, you probably are doing it by spray and pray, and you're getting some results and some recognition. But if you don't know how to track transactions and do all the kinds of things that gets to be really weeds conversation here that'll make everyone's eyes glaze over, then you're really kind of missing out on all of the opportunities to be able to go in and time remarketing for people who purchased birthdays for October, like they should have been hearing from you like in September, right? Those kinds of things. There's not an easy answer, right? If you're doing it on your own, do your best. They try to simplify these platforms, but time and again, I've had people who have come to us and say, well, we've been doing, Google AdWords, right? And it hasn't worked for us. Okay, well, let's look at what you've been doing. And they have like a list of like 7 keywords. And it's like, yeah, this isn't what the game is. This isn't what it's about. So
what is the game about? So you look at somebody, they've got 7 keywords. What are they missing in general? What is it they're missing there?
I mean,
do they need 100 keywords, or like?
They
go to thesaurus.com and just look up like all the different words that mean the same thing, and like what?
I mean, look, we start off by scraping competitor websites and looking at what keywords they're using. We're running percentages on keywords and modeling out success, right? And we haven't even started the campaign yet. We're looking at where the demos are, right? We're looking at any available demographic information that they have. One of the first places that we start with our B2C customers is because now we're under contract. We have an NDA in place. I want to put that out there. And we just say, look, give us an extract from your POS system for your revenue for the last, 14 months, 16 months. Let's see which zip codes are turning up revenue for you, right? Doing something that simple, that basic. from a B2B perspective, we talk to the sales teams. We try to get the sales teams to really identify what's the map look like? What are the hot zones for your opportunities where you've seen a lot of development, right? So a lot of this stuff, before you even get on a digital platform to do anything, it's like it's business 101. Where are you seeing your business come from? What are the messages that have resonated? Where have you been challenged and you've failed? Where have you been challenged and have been successful? I think the number one mistake that people make in digital marketing is that they forget to look at the basics of business, right? And look at that data critically and then build off of that so that they understand what does their buyer actually look like, and what is that SWOT of data that we're making these kinds of, getting these kinds of data points on, so that we can start to think about doing informed things from a marketing perspective. So it's, before you get dirty on a platform, get dirty with the information you have and be smart with it.
That's great advice. We'll stop right there. How do people, if people want to get in touch, how do they get in touch with you? So
they can get me right at Victor at Post&Wall. Spell it all out. POSTANDWALL.com, right? Post&Wall.com. You can get us at postandwall.com on our website. Go to our engagement page and send an email into engage@Post&Wall or Victor@Post&Wall. Thanks, Bob. And we're there. I think we don't necessarily always have the budget to fly out everywhere and be Don Draper, but I'll say this: spend 15 minutes with me, and I'll spot you the next 45. Because everyone's situation is so individual, right? Even if we're talking to multiple FECs, their territory is different, their market is different. Your market in New Jersey is not going to be the same as your market somewhere out in Nebraska. It's just not going to be. When you're talking about, they want to get into what's ad spend look like. It's, let's talk about your business, let's talk about your reality, and that's always the place to start. Outside of that, we do a lot of unsexy things with analytics and tracking and whatnot, but it's all about getting to the customer intent. And I saw Tanya's, I think she joined us a little bit late, but yeah, we definitely covered the customer journey for sure. Absolutely important.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Victor, thanks for joining. There's so much to cover. You can only do so much in an hour. You kind of skimmed the surface a little bit. Hopefully we got some nuggets for people. Next week I have Brent Bushnell from 2-Bit Circus. Brent is of the famous Bushnell clan. His dad Nolan started Atari, basically seen as the godfather of the arcade industry. He started Chuck E. Cheese, which is the first really family entertainment center chain. And his son Brent is following in his footsteps. And 2-Bit Circus is an amazing VR-focused mini amusement park, micro amusement park they call it, in downtown LA. And really, really interested to hearing about how they're going and where they're going from here. So join us next week. I'll be coming to you from Hawaii. Take that, suck that. For you, because you got to be somewhere, right? And I found a pet sit on the Big Island, so I'm watching a cat and some chickens. Nice. And so I got a week in Hawaii. Yeah, awesome. So thanks everybody for joining. Don't forget, share this with your friends. It'll be on social and we'll post it. Victor, thanks again for joining, man. I love you, and the work that you're doing for everybody in the community is really important and valuable. And so we appreciate you, all of us.
Bob, thank you so much. I appreciate you, and I love this community. So thank you so much for having me on today. Greatly appreciate it.
Beautiful. All right. Have a great day. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too. Peace out.